Are you a returning player who maybe hasn't played PokeMMO in a while and is wondering what you missed, what's new, and what are important mechanics to take advantage of? If so, then I hope this video is helpful to you, and welcome back to the game. My name is Patrouski. I've been playing PokeMMO since 2013, but I only have around 8,400 hours. I know what it's like to take a break from this game and step away and then come back and have everything be changed and have to relearn everything from scratch. So welcome to my what the heck happened in PokeMMO during the year 2023. I already have video guides for this for 2021 and 2022, and I was waiting for 2023 to finish to finally make a guide for that, and that was about a year ago at this point, so I bet it's about time to go ahead and jump into it. And let me prepare you for the fact that I think that 2023 was probably the most hype, exciting, most updated, most impactful year for PokeMMO ever, in my opinion. I'm going to go over things a bit more chronologically and in good detail, but to brush over the simple things that are super exciting, we got access to our first ever ownable mythical and legendary Pokemon in Shaman and a few others, as well as the Johto region was added in 2023. A lot of people forget that the Johto's only been in the game for about 1 year. And historically in PokeMMO, we get a new region about every 2 to 4 years or so, so if you're looking forward to Gen 6, you're going to be looking forward to it for quite a while. But let's focus on all the amazing content that we do have and that we got in 2023. One of the best ways to catch up on what you missed in PokeMMO is simply by going over the update logs on the forums, and I'll basically be doing that for you guys today here and going over individual points that aren't mentioned on the forums, because some things are added to PokeMMO in secret and you would never know that unless you played the game during that time and can remember or just stumble across it in your normal playthrough. All the update logs I'll be covering today will be linked in the description, so you can go over them at your own pace if you would like. First things first, let's go over the Lunar New Year event in 2023, and this brought back a couple of typical things we've seen before, like the Abundant Shrine, which is a PvM cooperative activity similar to a raid or a dungeon. It brought back similar vanities like we had seen before, like the Neon Hood. However, it also brought new things that we hadn't seen before, like holiday alpha swarms. Now, we had seen alpha swarms before. Alphas had been added to the game for about, I want to say, a few months at this point. They were added, I believe, late 2022, if I'm not mistaken. But seeing alpha swarms and holiday swarms dedicated, like themed around the Lunar New Year event was very, very interesting. A lot of this event was based on running around the world, collecting these Zodiac tablets and fighting the bosses that actually correlated with them. So the Zodiac Bunny tablet, for example, to do with the Chinese New Year, would correlate to fighting like a low punny raid fight. But more of just a low punny alpha fight. It was just a single encounter. We wouldn't see raids tested until 2024's Lunar New Year event. So once this year comes to a close, I will eventually do a what happened in 2024. If you want to see that video, make sure to like this one and subscribe to let me know you like this sort of content. But let's keep going. We ended up seeing the green and red harvest crowns and unity capes, which ended up being some of the most overlooked items in all of PokeMMO because everybody was distracted. Everybody was busy with getting Shaman and doing the Alpha Swarms and all these other pieces of content. People kind of neglected the simple gift shop vanity that were around 4 mil Pokeyen during the event and are now worth 32, 33, 36 million Pokeyen, 48 million Pokeyen for the green one, just 1.5 years later. A 10 times market value in about a year and a half is some of the most you will see in PokeMMO. That was truly a once-in-a-lifetime vanity spike. We also saw the Golden Rabbit mask, which didn't quite succeed as well and wasn't as beloved in my personal opinion. And we also saw Shiny Charms return as a seasonal thing. This was before Shiny Charms were permanently added to the gift shop. Now in PokeMMO, you can actually just go over to the gift shop in-game and buy a Shiny Charm whenever you would like, but this used to not be the case. They used to be tied to event releases, which put Shiny Charms in a really weird market where they would reach up to like 1 million, 1.2 million Pokeyen per Shiny Charm out of event season because there were so few left from the previous event season and so many people wanted to Shiny Hunt. This was also when we saw the massive PP nerfs to all of the healing moves that had taken place in traditional Pokemon at the time. So we saw things like Recover, Soft Boil, Rest, Milk Drink, Slack Off, Roost, and Heal Order all be reduced to 5 PP at their base. This was a massive deal for PvP and monstrously reduced access to and monstrously nerfed stall in PokeMMO. There was also a controversial change that happened here that was simply called a bug fix, where the XP reamplifier would stack with Matcha Brace. Now, if you don't know, The XP Reamplifier is an item within PokeMMO that you can buy with RP or buy the RP and then with Pokeyen and then buy that or whatever. But it's essentially an XP all that distributes XP and EVs to all of your Pokemon in your party. It's basically an XP all, but combining this item with Macho Braces, meaning you could just turn on the XP Reamplifier. You kind of just toggle it on. I can actually show you. Well, I should have one on me. One sec. Sorry. There we go. Basically, you would toggle it on, and then you could put Macho Braces. You then had item slots on all of your Pokemon, so you could put your Everstones or whatever if you don't want your Pokemon to evolve, or you could put Macho Braces on every Pokemon. And what this did was, it was pretty expensive. A lot of people had to go buy a bunch of Macho Braces. Macho Braces are not a cheap item, or they weren't at the time, rather. But people went and spent hundreds of thousands of Pokeyen, if not millions, on Macho Braces, and it allowed you to basically double all EV input on your Pokemon, while also XP training them, which wasn't historically possible in PokeMMO. Generally, you had to like choose between double EVs or like with no XP or just XP plus normal EV speed. So this allowed you to gain XP on all of your Pokemon while also doubling the EV game. But they did actually end up nerfing that, controversially, in my opinion. Now, they don't really mention it in the forum post, but this is also the year, I believe, they added Shaman for the first time. You would go around and complete all the tablets, and you would end up getting something, I believe, called like a dead flower. You could also get Deciduas. These were added at the time, and that was a big Pokeyen thing. Deciduas used to be decently expensive, and you could farm them, and you could get things like the, I think it's the nature, not mints, I believe they're called like nature herbs or something. Yeah, these only work, I will say, these only work on like Shaman and like some legendary Pokemon, as well as unknown. Not on every, they're not nature mints, they don't work on every Pokemon. But let's focus on the important thing. Shaman was added to the game for the very first time with the Spirit of Spring particle effect, which is super, super cute. And Shaman immediately took over UU with its Seed Flare ability. It was tested in OU, but honestly couldn't really stack up. But it has a really strong metagame spot in UU historically. Let's go check out, see how it's doing over in PvP stats. UU, we can see maybe it's fallen off a bit. 6% usage or so with 55% win rate. So extremely high win rate. Not as much usage. It used to be kind of up there, top tier, but kind of fallen off a little bit, but performing very well when it's played. It was crazy to see. This was the first ever mythical / legendary Pokemon ever permanently obtainable in PokeMMO. They did not add Skyform, and there is still no Skyform for Shaman in PokeMMO purposefully because they deem that to be too powerful from our assumptions. You can adjust all of Shaman's IVs with Deciduas. You cannot breed Shaman, so you can't shiny hunt it via that. And speaking of shiny hunting Shaman, Shaman is not shiny locked. You can actually encounter a shiny Shaman. However, no one in the game has done so. It's around a 16-hour grind or so doing all of the tablets just to be able to unlock your one Shaman encounter. So only so many players even got their Shaman the first year. However, Shaman does return every single year within PokeMMO. As you can see over here, I actually have 2 Patrouski OT Shamans. This one is from 2024. This was my 2024 encounter. You basically have one chance once a year to possibly encounter the first shiny Shaman. I'm really hoping we see the first one in 2025 in the next Lunar New Year event. Keep an eye out if you want to have your chance at Shaman. It should return to the game every Lunar New Year event every year around late January / early February. There was also a period of time where just farming the Deciduas for the nature herbs and then selling them to an NPC was insane Pokeyen per hour. I think people were selling these for like 1,000 to like 2,500 a piece. They ended up lowering their sell price all the way down to 250 Pokeyen, really cutting them off as a money-making method, as they weren't really supposed to be that, but it was better money per hour, much better, to farm Deciduas versus Lepa berries or normal berries that you would normally farm for profit. But I believe that fully covers the Lunar New Year event. Let's go ahead and move on to the next update. Like I said, this is going to be a pretty long video probably. There was so much added to PokeMMO in 2023. Next up, this is kind of a funny update to look back at because one of the things you'll notice first is it says changelog, April 28th, the day before my birthday, kind of funny, 2023, but it says Johto right here. We don't normally see updates with a tag like this, but this was Q letting us know, no, this is not Johto. Everybody was expecting Johto to release in the summer, and it didn't quite meet that deadline. We'll get to that here in due time, but Q wanted us to know, hey, this is not Johto. Sorry, this is Johto. Johto is not ready yet. But what we did get was a unbelievably incredible update, very refreshing update that nobody knew they needed until we got it, which is very PokeMMO developer fashion. This was the PC UI overhaul. I guess they call it a refresh. I always called it an overhaul. The PC UI has been refreshed to better accommodate players on mobile platforms and add inventory management features. Box name lengths can now be up to 20 characters. Box can be rearranged by dragging their position. Let me just show you guys some of this stuff in game because this sped things up dramatically. Being able to just head over to your boxes, bloop, and just drag around like this was not possible before. And it was a nightmare having to deal with all your boxes. Nowadays, if you were breeding like ditto boxes, for example, I could just press B, click and drag all of this, drag this over somewhere where I want to, boop, there it is, done. Now I can add 30 dittos. I can move, oh, I want to add this to my cell box, boop, just bop it over. If you want to add specific Pokemon, you can hold shift and left click and drag 5 Pokemon at a time, drop them here. You could drop them in the box. You could drop them in a specific spot in the box. This made PCs so much easier to manage, and it helped out players a ton. Players like me who have way too many Pokemon they need to get rid of. Also, as you can see, I've taken full advantage of the new renaming functions of the PC. They also increased the maximum PC expansion drives you could use from 10 to 14. So I believe that took it up to like 24 max PC boxes. I believe now you can actually have more than that. A good rule of thumb to keep in mind is that it's 11 boxes per row. So we have 2 rows here. That's 22, and then 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, and then 31 if you include the account box is now the total number of boxes you can have in PokeMMO, which is amazing. They also added a ton of advanced search features over in the GTL, which made it way easier for people to actually breed for profit or buy specific breeds. One of my favorite ones to go ahead and utilize is, let's say I want to start a Beldum breed, right? If I want to start a Beldum breed, I want, let's start with 3 times 25 plus, right? So I'm going to go ahead, let's do 31s maybe. If I'm looking for, I want to start a Beldum breed, I want it to have at least 2 times 31. What I would do in any stats that it needs, right? What's the cheapest 2 times 31 Beldum? What I would do is I would place all the stats that I want on a Beldum / Metagross. So I want everything except for special attack. I would do required IV matches too. That essentially means that it's going to need at least to match 2 of these to be able to find it. So if I search for Eldum like this, it's going to find me the cheapest 2 times 31 Beldum with any of those 31 IVs. There's so much more into this that I cover in price checking guides and just tons of different guides. You can search for alpha now. You can search for so many things. I recommend just playing with this. This is one of the most impactful updates that I feel like is underappreciated and underspoken about in PokeMMO. This is the GTL and PC UI overhauls were game changers for PokeMMO. We also saw a ton of move changes that affected both PVM and PvP. Hail being replaced with the new Snowscape. A lot of things just fitting the Gen 9 movesets and such. I believe this is when Torterra got access to Shell Smash and a bunch of things like that. There was a huge update with the Gen 9 game Scarlet and Violet DLC that added a bunch of new moves to a bunch of new Pokemon, and all of those came over to PokeMMO at the exact same time. We also saw the infamous Gallade Sharpness. This is one of the most powerful abilities to ever be added to PokeMMO, and Gallade took over and tore through OU for many months and was raved about being banned, and eventually was banned to Ubers for a period of time until they've kind of gone back and forth whether Sharpness should raise by 50%, 40%, 30%. They've tested a bunch of numbers, and currently, let's go check OU Gallade and see where it's at. Currently, Gallade is at 22% usage, quite high, 51% win rate. So it seems to be in a much healthier spot than it used to be. Apologies for hiding those stats from you guys. Here they are, 22% usage, 51% win rate, and it does use Sharpness 99% of the time. A bunch of moves were also changed to TMs, things like Fire Punch, Draco Meteor, Outrage, Superpower. These were pretty impactful and changed the way we learned those moves. They also got rid of the /DND command, which meant do not disturb. You would type that in your chat to sort of go a little antisocial, which we all do at times, right? Now there is something in game called the other menu. So you head over to settings, you go to other, and you can turn off whispers, you can turn off whatever you want, trades, friend requests, etc. This was honestly extremely helpful for a small content creator like myself. It really allowed me to focus on videos. Sometimes people will whisper me when I'm making videos, and it is always a nice message. It's always super kind, but I hear the whisper ding and my little brain just wanders off and I forget what I'm talking about, kind of like right now. They also added the trade log, which is constantly I wouldn't say constantly broken, but it breaks a fair bit. The servers do seem to have a little bit of a problem with it, but you can still see, I think it's still an amazing feature. It's only the last 10 Pokemon. I really wish they would expand this, only tracking 10 Pokemon. I would love to see more done with the trade log, but this was something. This was a big deal. Being able to see past purchases, past sales, have a little more recollection of your trades as opposed to just having to keep your listings. Like, I still have the habit of keeping all my listings like not collected so I can show them on stream to show you guys my progress, but the trade log was definitely super helpful with that as well. Also, super important to note here that protect spamming actually got nerfed in this update, which is probably better for competitive play, from 100% down to 33% on your next protect, as opposed to, like, I think it was 50% before, and would go down to like 25, etc., etc. Here it is a lot harsher, which is probably better for competitive play. This is quoted as a bug fix, but they added an animation for egg hatching, which was a really massive deal. Not really because we need an animation for egg hatching. Yeah, that's kind of nice, but what it actually did, it allowed the PokeMMO devs to add the quickest update I've ever seen within PokeMMO in the history of the game within 12 years. I'm serious. I've never seen the community be like, hey, you guys should add this thing, and them add it as quickly as they did. But essentially, the community was like, hey, can you guys add a only shiny option for the hatching animation? So essentially what this does is you will only ever see a hatching animation if you hatch a shiny Pokemon. So it's a way for egg hunters and rare shunters to know if you see that egg animation at all, it means you just got a rare shiny, which makes for incredible clips and incredible moments on live streams. I think that was suggested about the same day as the previous update, and it was added 2 days later. I've literally never seen an update that fast in PokeMMO history. Now, unfortunately, within that same update that allowed us to have that hatching only animation, they also introduced the ability to turn around your Pokemon sprite, which we all kind of agree was a grave mistake. But that should cover everything for the great PC and GTL UI overhaul update. Which then brings us to arguably one of the biggest, most important, and most hyped up updates ever within PokeMMO history, the release of Heart Gold Soul Silver in the Johto region. Now, we have to keep in mind, people were saying Johto tomorrow for 4 years leading up till this date on August 11th, 2023, when the region finally was released. I have never seen server queues as long as I have during this event. We were seeing hour plus, 1 hour and a half, 45-minute or so server queues just to be able to log in, to be able to play the new region. Everybody was so excited. It is truly something special. Being able to reappreciate and refeel the release of a new Pokemon game together with your friends, seeing everybody in the overworld grab their starter Pokemon, rush to the next town. It's such an exciting time. If there's one thing I can encourage you guys to do, it's to experience a release of a new region within PokeMMO. It is genuinely a beautiful, beautiful community building and just super fun, unique experience. It feels like everybody just got like a Pokemon Fire Red cartridge on the playground at school and you're all playing it together. It's an exciting time. Now, this brought a lot of changes with it, which I'll try to go through as much as I can. One of the big ones was the addition of all the new Pokeballs. Now, a lot of the new Pokeballs aren't actually that good. However, things like Love Balls are decently used. Fast Balls are nichely used. I think Level Balls are really nichely used. I think the most impactful ball that was added from Johto ended up being the Dream Ball. It increases your catch rate to 4 times if a Pokemon has been asleep for 2 turns, which can be really, really helpful for alphas before you actually get to those timer balls. This update also brought the worst mechanic to ever be introduced into PokeMMO, true and real, not a meme, being Voltorb Flip. Now, I was brave enough to not only go for the Voltorb Flip hat, but to go for it on live stream, which I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemies. There is something about this game that brings out a very special kind of person. Anyways, they added headbutting to the game, which was supposed to be a really exciting, unique type of encounter that would possibly add new shiny hunts into the game, would possibly switch up metagames, and just change so many things. Oh my goodness, now we can headbutt for Apom at a common encounter rate? Headbutting is really bad. Like, really, really bad. We pretty much use it for nothing in the game. The main problems are that each tree takes around 4 to 6 hours to refresh, and the odds of you actually getting an encounter seem to be so ridiculously low for some reason, as you can see. And then the Pokemon you get from them aren't even that amazing. Oh wow, I did all of this work for one Beedrill encounter. Headbutt is so far from being usable and being good, it would need a pretty monstrous update and a pretty monstrous buff to even see it be used by any shunters or anyone in PokeMMO, in my opinion. Headbutting is bad, unfortunately. Next up, the most impactful endgame location in all of PokeMMO, actually not a meme, was added to the game. Mount Silver. Mount Silver brought us so many things. It brought us the new best XP training spot in the entire game, which, if you aren't familiar, is hordes of Donphan and Dodrio, which the best method to actually kill these Pokemon, these hordes of Pokemon, is with a Surf special attacking Rampardos. So it brought my boy Rampardos into the meta game for PVM and XP training, which I think is extremely cool. It also added Larvitar ×5 hordes, so it gave us the best shiny hunting location for a rare shiny in the game. It added the best XP training spot. It also added one of the best moneymakers in the game with the red refight at the very top of the mountain, let alone just the red fight for a fun PVM post-game activity. It also added tons of EV training spots like this little ×5 horde of Poliwhirls down here, which is really good XP and speed EVs. And on top of all of that, everybody gets one Tyranitar Alpha that is a static spawn in this location. So every person, one per account, you can go catch your wild Alpha Tyranitar. Now, I have guides on all of this content in individual places. If you want to see individual guides and resources for these things, you know, Google PokeMMO Mount Silver guide, etc., etc. I have tons of videos on this, but I can't overexpress how big of a deal Mount Silver is. It is finally like a fun endgame location to go do things where you kind of do a lot of things, as opposed to just AFKing in Vermilion City. Like this is a massive thing. And the reason why it's endgame, I want to preface, to even access Mount Silver, you have to have a completed Pokedex, a fully caught OT Pokedex. Not only did this, you know, add all this amazing new content for endgame players and add the endgame spot, but it also gave you a reason to have to go complete your Pokedex. It finally got behind the motto of gotta catch them all and rewarded players for catching them all. Now, just in case you aren't aware, you do not need to catch the legendaries such as Shaman or Overworld legendaries, and we'll talk about that in a sec because these were added in secret alongside the Johto update, and nobody knew. This wasn't in the post for a sec. Nobody knew what we didn't know that there were legendaries in the game until someone just happened to stumble across like a Moltres or something in the wild. Quick correction, I believe that Suicune was the first ever legendary Pokemon added to PokeMMO. And the way it works is, and I have a full-on guide explaining all of this once again in great detail, but essentially, after you completed the Ho-Oh boss fight in the Johto region, which was also added along the Johto region, they added a Gyarados boss fight and a Ho-Oh boss fight. But after you completed the Ho-Oh boss fight, which was around the 8th gym badge, you would then be able to randomly encounter the legendary roaming Pokemon of that month. And this Pokemon essentially changes each month. So we can go to wild locations and see there's actually no wild locations for Suicune right now, which means it's a different Pokemon in the wild. I can go check because I have my Pokedex, so we can see Raikou right now is in the wild. It'll be in the wild. It's currently September 30th as I'm recording this. Once October 1st hits, it will switch and be a new Pokemon, and it's always the same rotation. I forget that exact rotation. It's something like, it might be Suicune, Raikou, Entei, I don't remember. There's some command in my Discord you can also click. I think it's !roaming to see what legendary Pokemon are currently active. But in Kanto and in Johto, there are different roaming legendaries you can go catch. You can go catch Zapdos, Articuno, Moltres, Raikou, Suicune, and Entei and own them permanently. It was a massive deal. They added permanently ownable legendaries for the first time in PokeMMO history. They were able to be used in PvP, they were able to be used in PVM, and so far they seem to be mostly balanced. Zapdos has monstrously changed up the metagame in OU, but it seems to be in a mostly healthy way. I'm not a PvP expert, you can ask other people their thoughts on that. Another important little just quality of life change that they did that was absolutely massive, the stack size for items was increased from 99 to 9,999. This was such a nice, comfy change for people like myself who need thousands of Pokeballs for shiny hunts. As you can see, even this stack of 500 Pokeballs would have been 5 separate stacks in my inventory before, which was so annoying to look at and to scroll through. The big one, honestly, is when you're farming Dittos, you have to scroll down to Netball nowadays. And just getting to Netball was a pain in the butt when you have to scroll down through all these different stacks of Pokeballs. I was buying 2,000, 3,000 Pokeballs at a time during Shiny Wars to do all my eggs and such like that. Being able to have all these items in much cleaner stacks is so much nicer. Look at this nice big stack of nuggets, for example. Not having this separated into 10 stacks or 11 stacks is so nice. It really just makes the bag in general a lot cleaner, and it's easier to look through and sort through, which was a massive problem we were already kind of suffering. There were a bunch of small updates, or quote-unquote small updates, that were weaved in that were actually a really massive deal. For example, this is when Dream Balls were added in Pokemarts. This was when you can now use the trade evolution item on a Pokemon. So for example, with a metal coat, you could just use it on a Scyther as opposed to having to trade it with someone, which just removes the possibility for scams and frustrations for new players trying to get that Scizor. PvP reward comps actually got a small buff, which is kind of funny because they probably need a lot more buffs, but they were allowed to select all moves to be added to them instead of just egg moves. Matchmaking statistics were kind of moved and focused on a bit more. The default time limit for advanced duels was now an hour. A lot of small changes like this that were really, really, really helpful. Charm effect cooldowns now show during the mobile battle screen. And then once again, more massive changes just casually. These were, keep in mind, these were dropped alongside Johto being released, which was a massive deal. The Whirlpool and Headbutt Ocarinas were available because obviously they came in with Johto. Shiny Charms were moved to the gift shop permanently. We already touched on that vaguely. Cherish Balls became a thing. They buffed donator statuses for kind of no reason. Like, this is something you don't really see developers do. What is the incentive for a developer to slightly buff a piece of content like this? Like, players aren't going to go, oh boy, now I can make 5% more Pokeyen from defeating trainers. I didn't buy donator status before, but now I will for sure. Like, no, like all this is like, all this did was benefit players who were already buying the donator status. No one else is buying it just because of this. This was just a small buff to players who support their game, which I think was an amazing decision. And the XP reamplifier was also buffed pretty significantly and made it a lot more usable. Premium lures were added to the game and are extremely powerful, but extremely expensive for what they're worth. Quick tip, premium lures and legendary lures are not worth using in my personal opinion. They just cost around 400,000 to 600,000 Pokeyen per hour. It is disgustingly expensive. Expert lures are incredible. Stick to those. As we can see, sharpness was nerfed from 1.5 to 1.3. I think this has been changed. It's either 1.4 or 1.5 now. This re-enabled delayed into OU. It was previously banned to Ubers because it was so good. This is also when the infamous repeat ball change happened. There was a lot of Pokeballs. There were so many changes on this update. Repeat balls went from one of the best Pokeballs in PokeMMO to one of the worst. Previously, with repeat ball, if you had the Pokemon caught OT in your Pokedex, it would just be a flat 2.5 times catch rate. And then this changed it so that every time you catch a Pokemon in succession, so if you catch like, it starts at 1 times catch rate, right? And if you catch 15 Dittos in a row, you raise it to 2.5 times for every Ditto from there on out. But if you catch a different species, it resets it to 1.0. It was so much work just for a 2.5 times catch rate when you have things like net balls giving 3.5 times catch rate for very little work. You have things like dream balls getting 4 times catch rate for like something that naturally happens. Repeat balls tanked off the face of the planet, in my opinion. I really think they need to be buffed, but that's not a video about that. That'll be a different video in the future talking about the current Pokeball market. But heal balls were reduced. Nest balls price was reduced. Luxury ball functionality changed a little bit. Dive ball was buffed a bit. This was the infamous net ball. I've been saying for a while, this was the big change that took repeat ball from the best ball in the game to the worst ball and made net ball, in my opinion, broken. Once again, we'll do a video on that in the future maybe. Players are now limited to using 4 items from their bag in most PvE trainer battles. This was a big deal for casual players jumping into the game and doing the storyline. This made the storyline harder, allowing you to you can't like spam revives. It allows you to only use for healing items, revives, etc. during those gym leader fights, etc., which kind of does add a little more consistency to the storyline, which is kind of nice, but it definitely prevents certain cheesing. Later on, we had a following changelog that added a bunch of little things and cleaning up stuff in the Johto region. They added a flight point for Johto's Union Cave. They added the daycare, which didn't exist day one. They just weren't sure what was like 100% ready. Incense is now sold in all daycare shops, which made it a lot easier. Previously, you'd have to like head over to Hoenn and go to Rustboro to get certain incenses for certain baby Pokemon. And then it was confirmed that roaming legendaries may now all be found in the Johto outdoor maps instead of just routes. Prismatic Pearls were updated for Johto spawns, and this added a ton of new shiny hunts to the game. A lot of new shiny hunts changed with the addition of Johto. Miltank, for example, went from being an egg hunt to a 5x horde Pokemon. Now, it's important to talk about, we'll kind of just skip ahead, I guess, to this. Upcoming is where probably the most controversial and biggest shiny hunting change in the history of PokeMMO happened. We saw so many updates in 2023. A new region drop, legendaries added, the biggest shunting change, insane PvP changes, just tons and tons of stuff. All right, but that is mostly it for the Johto changelog. Let's skip ahead to the next one because I want to talk about something very, very interesting that was considered a quote-unquote bug fix. So let's talk about this. First, let's talk about all the shiny hunts that changed with Johto. So for example, Miltank went from being an egg hunt to a ×5 horde. Tauros went from being an egg hunt to a ×5 horde encounter. Larvitar went to being a ×5 horde. I think Horsey also went from a fishing shunt to a ×5 horde. Delibird got an extra ×5 horde spot that was much more powerful. So many shiny hunts were excruciatingly buffed to a drastic degree. Dratini, you know, everybody loves shiny Dratini, Dragonair. Not so much Dragonite, I think it's overhated, but Dratini, Dragonair, really amazing shinies, was given a ×5 horde location in Johto. So many rare shunts became so much easier in Johto, which power creep is gonna happen, but it was a lot, and I think the devs even realized it was maybe a little too much. Because about 1 month after adding Johto, they did this. They said, fixed an issue where hordes, when lured by Sweet Scent, would not have their odds weighed correctly. Previously, all hordes had an equal chance of being encountered. Now, they're weighted as if the player encountered them through walking. So, what does that mean? Let me explain this. The best example to explain this with, I believe, is Tynamo. So, over in a certain cave in Unova, you can ×5 horde shiny hunt for Tynamo. And before this change, Tynamo was a 50-50 horde split with Joltik, but as you can see, Tynamo is supposed to actually be a very rare encounter in terms of single encountering. So, the horde encounter is supposed to match that rarity. So what happened was, it went from a 50-50 chance of encountering ×5 hordes of Tynamo and Joltik to now a 20-80 split. I'm going to use that word a lot, 20-80 split. That essentially means there is now a 20% chance to encounter Tynamo and an 80% chance to encounter Joltik, which means with a shiny rate of 1 out of 30,000, it's going to take you 5 shiny hunts on average at that location just to get that one Tynamo. That means you're going to end up with 4 shiny Joltiks on average just to get one shiny Tynamo. And this was a big deal. A lot of players, I think this is the most controversial shiny hunting update ever. A lot of people quit the game. A lot of people said they would quit the game, but didn't actually because it worked out. I do think, having looked over this, the first time I heard this update, I was appalled. I was like, this is horrible. This is awful. After spending time to think about it, I have a video actually very calmly making a notepad document going over my thoughts, and I actually do think that this update was a great update looking back, but it was painful in the moment, and it was annoying to see happen, and it kind of sucked, but I think it's important for the future of PokeMMO and for the future of difficulty tiers in shunting. I'm not going to go over this in detail here, but I think it wouldn't be fair to you guys without telling you, hey, this was an important moment in history for PokeMMO. Like, people were outraged. People were mad that people, you know, these shiny hunts that they were planning on doing that were 50-50s now all of a sudden got a lot harder for seemingly no reason. And I think the biggest problem, I'll go over this, calling it a bug fix is just not even borderline disrespectful. It is just blatantly disrespectful to all the shunters. This was clearly an intended mechanic by you guys, unless you've literally never shunted, like unless the devs have never shiny hunted ever in their whole life. Like, this is so obviously like this was intended. This was not a bug fix. This was an intended mechanic that they wanted to go back on and fix, and you should have just called a balance and change. Calling this a bug fix is hilariously, grotesquely disrespectful in my opinion. But it also makes sense, you know? We added all these rare shunts like Larvitar, like Dratini, like Miltank, like Tauros, etc., etc. A lot of those got turned into 2080 splits. So they don't go from egg hunts, which is around a 1 to 2,000 hour hunt, to, oh, all of a sudden now they're at ×5 horde hunt. It's like 45 hours on average for a 50-50 split, right? Now they're like 150 hours on average because you have to do 5 shiny hunts on average. The biggest problem from this point forward with this change, I think it actually does add a really cool difficulty tier to ×5 hordes. The problem is the amount of duplicates. Nobody, even the highest end shunters, nobody needs 4 Joltics. Nobody needs 4 Onyxes on the way to 1 shiny Larvitar. Nobody needs 4 Magikarps on the way to 1 shiny Dratini. I really hope that in the future we see an update to this where they add in more species to all of these spots. I think adding, let's say you take Dratini and it's 20% chance for Dratini, 80% for Carp. I like the idea of adding and maybe throw in Horsey in there. Make it 20, 40, 40 or something, right? Throw in a little bit of variance so people aren't ending up with 4 of 1 shiny just to get the shiny that they actually want when they leave the location. Anyways, enough about that ramble. Let's go ahead and move back. Let's rewind a little bit and head back to the beginning of this update, because that was just a bug, quote-unquote bug fix. The other stuff that was added was pretty massive. We saw Shiftry getting access to Wind Rider, which is a pretty cool, powerful ability that really helps. I think it absorbs a wind move. Yeah, and basically boosts its attack stat, which is kind of cool. Gives a little bit of an immunity to flying type attacks like Hurricane and stuff, which is kind of interesting. Empoleon got access to its hidden ability competitive, and then we saw more move changes updating up to Gen 9. We also saw a more powerful version of Ho-Oh. So this was like the Ho-Oh refight that was added to the game, which dropped Rainbow Quills and Legendary Lures. Legendary Lures are a way to increase your odds of encountering a legendary Pokemon. I touched on them vaguely earlier. They are extremely expensive for their effect. They increase your chance of encountering a roaming legendary by 30%. However, the amount that you need to pop on average to actually get it, really high. I don't recommend them, but they are a good drop for the Ho-Oh refight, adding some nice Pokeyen per hour there. You can also only do the Ho-Oh refight weekly, which I think is really interesting. The Red refight and the Ho-Oh refight added some of the first weekly type of content you could do in PokeMMO, which historically it was like an every 18 hours or 6 hours sort of content. They also buffed the Red refight, making it more difficult to take down. And they also, in this update, re-enabled access to Draco Meteor on Hydreigon. Hilariously, they tested this in PvP, and turns out it was still too broken, and they banned it again. But at least you can actually use Draco Meteor now on Hydreigon in PVM, from my understanding. The Meowth Horde in Kanto below, I believe, Cerulean City, below Misty's gym, was weirdly removed. I don't remember why they did this or what the reasoning was. I'm guessing it was to remove an amulet coin farming spot for bots. It was probably a little too early in Kanto and bots were able to get access to it too quickly, and I think that's the main reason why it was removed. It wasn't as efficient as doing the Island 1 spot in Kanto anyway, so for endgame players or for your average player, even like your average player, like it wasn't really a big deal, but it was weird to see it oddly removed, but we think it was because to prevent bots. Other than that, there was a ton of other bug fixes to the client and to the game server itself. Nothing really important from my understanding beyond the quote-unquote bug fix, the shiny hunting change. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next update in 2023, which is the Halloween event. Halloween event returned to PokeMMO, which brought a lot of familiar faces, but also a ton of new things. You could beat up children and steal their candy, as per usual, but you could also get Alpha Swarms, which included things like Hidden Ability Access Chandelure, if I'm not mistaken, which was pretty interesting, and also Mysterious Wisps, my least favorite piece of content to ever make a guide for in PokeMMO, was added to the game, which added a bunch of Halloween alphas and gave Pokemon access to their hidden ability. Another one, a decent one is a hilarious one, I guess, example is Gengar. Gengar technically has access to its hidden ability in PokeMMO if you actually head over to the GTL and go Gengar, and then we can use the new advanced GTL features that were added in this year. Search for hidden ability access. The cheapest Gengar with hidden ability access is 45k. However, it has access to its hidden ability, but it doesn't actually have one in the game because Levitate Gengar is broken. It's been too broken in PokeMMO historically. So hilariously, it technically has hidden ability access, but it doesn't actually use its hidden ability. Kind of funny, I know. We also saw Chandelure, hordes of Alpha Chandelures and such being added with Infiltrator is genuinely a relevant hidden ability to have access to. And then arguably more importantly, the flaming motorcycle was added to the gift shop, which this was a big deal. This was at the time the second only bike vanity to be added to the game that actually was a very strong change to the bike, as you can see here. Previously we had the sleigh, but that was in 2021, right? Seeing the flaming motorcycle for the first time in 2023, that was a 2-year gap between the sleigh being the first real big different bike vanity and now having the flaming motorcycle 2 years later. Nowadays we also have the lucky dragons as well, so there are some new ones now, but it was a really big deal at the time, and the flaming motorcycle is still personally my favorite. The Pump Cat and Trick Kitty hats were also added to the game at the time, and these were a massive fan favorite. I mean, put a kitty cat on a player's head and they are gonna be interested. These got really expensive at certain times, but I think that they've cooled down a lot now. Yeah, coming down to around 3.8, maybe 4 mil. Let's check Trick Kitty, for example. The orange one being a little bit cheaper than the black cat, being around 4.3 mil or so. These are usually around 4 mil or so at the time of the event because they just cost RP, so it's a pretty consistent price. But these were limited to that year, so it was a pretty interesting vanity, whereas the flaming motorcycle returns every single year. You can actually buy this this Halloween event, which is very, very cool in my personal opinion. Love Disc Heart Scales actually received a buff right around this time. I think they were nerfed at some point previously as well, so there was a bunch of finicky changing in terms of percentages regarding heart scales around this time period. It was also around the time period, this might have been closer to 2022, I don't exactly remember, but at some point mushrooms were also removed from the game, tiny mushrooms and large mushrooms, so you couldn't actually use those. They're still in the game, but you can't use them. The move relearner for them was removed. So previously you would use either tiny mushrooms or large mushrooms or heart scales to be able to relearn moves on your Pokemon. It's why I actually have a massive stack of both mushrooms, because they were really useful. I used them all the time. However, these all of a sudden got basically nerfed into oblivion. They're basically just at their sell price. And then heart scales, they clearly wanted heart scales to be the only item for you to use to relearn moves, which really just allowed the game to focus on one economy. At the time, mushrooms were dirt cheap and heart scales were both dirt cheap, but if you remove one from the game and just make it heart scales, then at least one of those items can have some scarcity and gain value. So I think nowadays heart scales are usually around 6 to 8k. Let's go ahead and double check. Yeah, around 7k at the moment. Depends on how many people are farming Love Disc at the time and how many people are relearning moves for PVM and PvP Pokemon. Also, just a lot of buffs to bosses, making boss fights harder and harder, which we would see even more in great detail once the raid beta test came out next Lunar New Year event. That was in 2024, though. And then moving onward, still in the Halloween event, mostly just a bunch of balancing and changes to the boss. And then we even saw another buff to the Love Disc Heart Scale, one patch later from 12% up to 15%. I think the price of heart scales was pushing 15 to 20k at the time, so they just needed more in the market and in the economy. And then a quick little mailbox change. Players with extremely full mailboxes will no longer be able to make GTL purchases without being at a PC in-game. The limit is currently 3,000 messages, and this limit will become more restrictive over time. They were trying to crack down on players, honestly like myself at times, who use the mailbox as sort of a quasi storage system. As you can see, I'm almost always at max or around it. They really wanted to crack down on that and force players to clean things up so they wouldn't have to use so much server room on storing things like Pokemon mail. All right, but that is pretty much it, I believe, for the Halloween event. Unless I'm forgetting anything, let me know in the comments once again if you think I missed anything important. Moving on to the Christmas event, or the holiday special in 2023, whatever you want to call it. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Xmas 2023 Season's Greetings. A massive bird is taking down Santa's sleigh. We saw the return of the... No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I think that this was actually, if I remember correctly, this was the time that we actually didn't see, for whatever reason, we did not see the Christmas dungeon return. If you ever played the Christmas event, you know that they throw you into Twist Mountain, and it's like this sort of PVM cooperative style dungeon that you and a bunch of players do together. This didn't return this Christmas season, which was a very odd thing, and a lot of players were super confused by it. Instead, you would run around the world and collect lost presents and return them to eventually get an Alpha Delibird encounter. A lot of the memories are flooding back to me now. From my understanding, this Christmas event was one of the most hated and disliked events probably in PokeMMO history for a couple of different reasons. First things first, let's cover the big one. I think it's called the Mysterious Gem. The Wishing Stone. I don't know how I thought Mysterious Gem, but the Wishing Stone. This was an item that was achieved via doing around a 16-hour grind that I, of course, did. And this item currently has no use in the game. It was promised to us, hey, if you do the Wishing Stone grind, don't worry, you will be rewarded. That was almost 1 year ago now, and we have not seen any use for us. So a lot of players like myself did a 16-hour grind and understandably are a little frustrated that 9 months later we still haven't seen any use for it. A lot of us, put off doing other things in that event to be able to get this supposedly very illustrious, very good item that would be used for at least something at some point. And I guess that's the risk you take with something like that, and I'm personally just used to having patience when it comes to the PokeMMO developers, but a lot of newer players were definitely very frustrated, and are still very, very frustrated. We also, I believe, it was this event where we saw the addition of the Fairy Elfbot outfit and the Fairy Elfbot hat, a pink Santa hat. I'm a big fan of this item. This was also the event that introduced two of the most controversial shiny updates into PokeMMO's history. Number one, the addition of Mysterious Balls. Let's quickly talk on that for a sec. Mysterious Balls added the first ever way to pay to win to a shiny hunt in PokeMMO. I could sit here and ramble on and on about how much I hate Mysterious Balls and how bad they are for the game for quite a long time, but essentially, Mysterious Balls took the fastest shiny hunt in PokeMMO from around 27 hours, maybe 24 hours with Donor status and Shiny Charm, all the way down to less than 2 hours. You could all of a sudden swipe mom's credit card, pop Mysterious Balls, and possibly have a chance at a shiny Chansey, a shiny Eevee, or some sort of rare shiny in less than an hour and a half. Now, it would cost extreme amounts of US dollars to be able to do that, but we all know that there are whales in any game, and the fact that you could get an OT shiny, an OT rare, that would usually take 1,000 to 2,000 hours, all of a sudden, in an hour and a half, I think this is one of the most integrity undermining and frustrating things to ever see within PokeMMO. This is my least favorite update, I think, in the history of PokeMMO personally. Now, a lot of people think I'm being over dramatic and think I'm taking it too seriously. And honestly, to those people, I understand where you're coming from, and I encourage you to have that opinion. There's nothing wrong with that. But also don't disregard my opinion by simply saying, oh, you're just taking it too seriously. It doesn't really add anything to the conversation. The next big update that happened at that point was the 20% shiny boost. This was Holiday Magic is in the air, increasing the base shiny rate of all encounters by 20%. This stacks with normal shiny charms and donator status. This was insane, and to add this with Mysterious Balls at the time was just absolutely ridiculous. Now, Mysterious Balls didn't actually get affected by the Holiday Magic, to be fair, but they did get affected by shiny charm and donator status, from my understanding. But this is a very problematic thing for a lot of reasons. There's a similar problem in RuneScape 3 with double XP weekends. You don't want the metagame to be saving up all of your materials and saving up all of your resources to only farm during a certain time period. You don't want people to, okay, I want to go for this shiny Beldum. Now, it's inefficient for me to do it outside of Holiday Magic, so what I'm going to do is wait all year. I'm going to feel guilty and bad, and I can't shunt the Pokemon that I want to shunt because it's not efficient to do so. I'm going to wait until just during the Christmas event. I think encouraging people to play in the playstyles they want is very important. If you want to play at 100% efficiency, I don't think you should only be able to do that during a 7-day period once a year. If you want to play super inefficiently, that's awesome and more power to you. I think encouraging people to play however they want to play is very important, and time restricting either type of play, in my opinion, is very harmful. It's also just poor for the economy as well. It doesn't make things stable. It makes things very jolty and very spiked during certain time periods. Keep in mind, this is also during the Christmas event, aka during Christmas. So for players who wanted to shiny hunt efficiently, they would have to not spend time with their family on Christmas Day and Christmas morning. Now, hopefully you didn't make that decision. Arguably spending time with your loved ones is more important than shiny hunting, but who am I to judge? It depends who you are, I guess. It's just, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems with Holiday Magic. It's a very cute thing. If it was just a one-time thing, and we believe it's just a one-time thing, to be fair, I think that this was an apology from the devs for missing the anniversary event that year. And like delaying the Johto release. The Johto's release was also delayed a ton. I think that's what this is, but hopefully we don't see it this year. That's all I would like to say on that. In terms of a quick UI/client change, which is super nice, they added it so you could save multiple logins, login credentials, which is super nice for alt accounts. We saw a buff to legendary lures, which made them Still not worth it, but closer to that level. We also saw the infamous Guadu update, which added an extra confirmation step when releasing certain valuable monsters. So previously, if you right-clicked on a Pokemon and hit release, even on a shiny Pokemon, right? If you misclicked on a shiny and then hit release, let's do it on something like this. It would go ahead, like yes, it would go ahead and just release it. But now we can actually cancel that release. Like the video for that, for risking that release. Now we can actually cancel it. There was an infamous clip where someone, a very high tier shunter named Guadu, very accidentally and very ridiculously quickly released his shiny Bulbasaur on accident. And it may sound ridiculous. How is that possible? How do you make that mistake? If you watched the clip at that time, it happens in less than half a second. It happens so fast, and it's such a weird misclick where you're like, oh, I actually super get how that could happen. He was clearly trying to drag his Bulbasaur, and it just happened in a way where it was just weird. But thankfully, he was able to get that Bulbasaur restored by the devs by submitting a support request ticket, and the Guadu update was added to the game. I just realized I jokingly almost released a shiny to show you guys what it looked like, and I didn't even show you on screen, so we'll go ahead and do that now. We're going to risk it once again. You can click cancel release on a shiny Pokemon. And I believe that finally covers everything. A few more buffs and updates here and there. Things like Mysterious Balls getting more rare species encounters like Shelgon. I remember that buff. Certain, you know, just random things, the Wishing Stone, certain buffs and changes to that grind during that grind period. But that is mostly it. That is most everything that happened in 2023 within PokeMMO. In my opinion, the biggest update year in the history of the game. Once again, if I missed anything, let me know in the comments. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Dislike if it wasn't helpful. Subscribe if it was helpful and you want to see more daily Pokemon MMO videos and PokeMMO videos themselves. And just thanks for watching. Follow on Twitch for streams Monday through Friday. Discord's down below if you want to join a really cool community. And if you want to go above and beyond and support my content, allow me to make stuff like this, YouTube memberships, Twitch Primes, Twitch subs, PayPal/Venmo, and yeah, just support like that helps out a ton. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I will see you guys later, and welcome back to PokeMMO. Peace, Reno. Hey, thanks so much for watching until the very end of the video. That really means the world to me, and it means even more worlds to me if you go above and beyond and support my content financially like all of these lovely people have done. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.